Here today. I'm sure that you had to brave some traffic to get here, and so you must have some real desire to find out what's going on in this space. So I'm glad you're here, and good morning. My name is Fas Mosleh, and I work for Tech, and we are a transaction firm in the IP space. I want to thank Katie from SIIA and Faisy from Corent Technologies, who've actually sponsored this discussion. And so let's begin. Obviously this is going to be fairly interactive. We're a relatively small group of people. I want to start with this one because I like this. Survival of the fittest. How many people have seen this before? Just raise your hands. You don't have to be that honest. Every morning in Africa, a gazelle wakes up. It knows it must run faster than the fastest lion or it will be killed. Every morning a lion wakes up. It knows it must outrun the slowest gazelle, or it will starve. The slowest gazelle, starve to death. It doesn't matter whether you're a lion or a gazelle. When the sun comes up, you better start running. I think this African proverb really meets today's kind of business climate fairly well. You better start running. And IP is one of the areas, particularly on the patent side, that for the high-tech industry, is a critical area for us to leverage, to help us survive and be the fittest. So, as I said, SIIA and Corent Technologies sponsored this talk, and we're going to talk about monetizing IP. I thought about this a little bit, and I thought, in reality, there are 8 ways to monetize different types of IP. But we'll talk about 6 examples today, and they'll come up later. Before we begin, I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. IP today is a big deal. And when I say big deal, I'm talking about deals like Google buying Motorola Mobility for $12.5 billion. Apple and Microsoft beat Google out for Nortel's patents, and they bought those for $4.5 billion, about 6,000 patents. If you add that up, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars per patent, $500,000 or something like that. Of course, these are special situations, and the patents were needed for special situations. But this kind of thing is on the rise, and there are a lot of smaller deals going on in the tens of millions, millions, even hundreds of millions that don't make the news in the same way as this is. So we're going to talk about, in 3 areas basically. I want to talk about kind of the new IP universe, how things have evolved in the IP space, in the market. Talk about monetization. How do you, create money from patents and from IP? We'll stick around patents more than trademarks and copyrights and even trade secrets. Then we'll go into the 6 examples, and then look at some ideas about rules and actions and next steps that can be taken. This is kind of my background. I don't want to dwell on this. I spent about 23 years. Most of the time I spent as an operating executive or an operating person in an operating company, IBM, Hewlett-Packard, software, hardware, also semiconductor as well. So kind of spans from chip to software in my background. And I founded HP's first venture fund in 1998. I also ran acquisitions for intellectual ventures worldwide. I also ran part of the sales part of the patent group in HP in the last few years. So we won't dwell on this too much, but really move into the presentation. And I can't answer some of the big questions of the universe. Where's the remote control? Or what is the meaning of the universe? Is it 42 or not? And my favorite one, can we indeed travel faster than the speed of light? And the answer to this, we still don't know quite yet. As you know, in Europe, they're trying to find out if these particles were able to travel faster than the speed of light. What I want to say, though, is that I don't want there to be speed limits. I would love us to be able to go faster than 186,300 miles per second. So, no speed limits in this particular presentation. Now, let me borrow something from Jane Austen. It is a truth universally acknowledged. The rest of it is not from Jane Austen, but IP is a key driver for the economy, particularly in high tech. Okay. How many people have read Pride and Prejudice? Okay, he's the same guy every time. What's going on?
Don't be shy.
Is he a ringer? Is he a ringer? Is he a ringer? No, Steve in the back also put his hand up. Okay, this is why nobody understood what I said about Jane Austen. We must have too many engineers in the room. How many people are engineers? Oh, quite a few. Not that many, but quite a few. Okay. All right. IP is also often a fundamental component for a company's business or their business model. You know, IBM, Hewlett Packard, TI, Ericsson, all of these people use IP in a big way. But companies like Rambus, and I can see you down there, Peter, or even Qualcomm, you know, it's actually their business model. This is not just about, you know, this is their business model. And then the last piece there is, honestly, in a company, small or medium size, but especially a larger company, to manage IP and to extract value, it takes a lot of attention and dedication because it's a complex area. It cannot be just done by the seat of your pants. It really does take effort. So these are important things to realize, and in managing ROIP, what I call ROIP, I should trademark that, return on intellectual property, that is the piece that's extremely challenging and complex. But this picture is supposed to give you a kind of a rough idea, you know, rough way of thinking about it in your head. So you've got, on the left-hand side, you've got the human capital that helps you to create intellectual assets in your company, whether it's small or large. Assets are processes, documents, databases, experience, right? The psyche and the experience of your company. And then there's intellectual property. And you know, some of the components of that will be your patents, your copyrights, your trademarks, and your trade secrets. And I missed some off here. Does anybody know what I missed off here? Anybody who's not a lawyer who can tell me what I missed off here? Contracts, right? You can actually protect what you're doing through actual contracts, just through normal contracts. But so these are the types of intellectual property that are there in companies. But patents are the ones we're going to talk more about than any of these. And you know, just to kind of give you a little bit of a framing, what do patents matter in a tech company? In a tech company, you have a number of important assets, right? Some of them are intellectual assets, some of them are the people, human capital, the processes, the management, the team, the brand, the copyrights, the trademark. Patents are in there, particularly for high-tech companies. And in high-tech companies, in some high-tech companies, the patents are a lot of that company. In some others, they're not as much, but in some they're worth a lot more for that company. And that's what you kind of found with companies like Motorola, for example, Motorola Mobility. Patents are worth that. Kodak's market value, market cap. Does anybody know what their market cap is roughly today?
5 million?
Whoa! That's pretty assertive.
For bankruptcy.
Yeah, exactly. It was 200 million a few days ago, right? 200 million. And their patents they're trying to sell for $1 billion. Yeah. So this box is bad because this is actually like that. It should be around their company. You know, patents are worth more than the company's worth. I want to give you kind of just to kind of understand the market a little bit. This is just an example of who's suing who inside the mobile space only, okay? And the reason I put it there is because this gives you an idea of what's going on and why things are heating up. It's a space that people want to go after. It's, you know, billion plus units a year sold. Smartphones are growing like crazy because all human beings realize, oh, smartphones can do a lot better than just my phone, right? So smartphones are getting better and better.
And this is just mobile?
This is just for mobile, yes. This is just for, as an example. In fact, I have another example here, a different way of looking at it. The names outlined.
Thank you, it's better.
Right? So you've got RIM, you've got Qualcomm, you've got Samsung, everybody's fighting somebody in some way. And then some cases are being settled and some are not being settled, and money is flowing basically. So the reason I bring this up is because it just is one example, and in reality there are less dramatic, less glamorous examples in other segments. Okay, so you've got networking, you've got web applications and software. They're not as dramatic as this, because this is, they got a lot of visibility with Apple and with Google and the fights going on. But this at least gives you a sense of what's out there. When Samsung was fighting Apple regarding the Galaxy, they actually made the claim that Apple has already copied something that was in existence, years ago in the 60s or the 70s when this movie was made. Does anybody know which product they're talking about?
It's the Galaxy.
Right. No, actually, it's the iPad. So they were basically saying, Galaxy was saying, Samsung Galaxy, because Samsung makes Galaxy. As Apple was attacking them in Europe, for example, they were saying, there's a product that the iPad is already been copied. It's copied from this movie. Okay. So if you look carefully, I'll show you this. It's that product right there. Right? So they're saying it's already been copied by Apple, and therefore they don't deserve to win. That's how crazy things are getting. Okay? I'm just trying to give you an example of what's happening in this space. Another way of looking at this more analytically, this research was done about a year and a half ago by the PwC, and it shows you that there are 3 areas that are changing. First one up there is computer hardware electronics, growing from a ranking of number 6 to number 2 in terms of the number of cases that they have, IP cases. Software going from 8 to 7. Internet and online services going from 20 to 11. Okay, it's just a snapshot. High-tech, computer, software, hardware, internet, getting a lot more active in terms of IP cases. Non-practicing entities, various companies out there, NPEs. They are companies who are not operating companies. They don't create products that they sell. They deal in buying and selling of and licensing primarily of IP, of patents. And operating companies, many of them are concerned about NPEs who exert patents against them. And they are building things like a good defensive kind of system to try to invalidate patents that might be coming up against them in some way. And definitely monetizing and leveraging as much as they can of what they currently have to defend or even to attack. Attack is also seen as a form of defense. And of course, proactively identifying and diffusing risky patents. So, what I'm trying to do is try to show you that there is demand in the market for patents that are out there that people will buy because they want to take them off the street. Or NPEs will buy because they want to exert them and bring in revenues. So that gives you a market and a value to the IP and to the patents. Now, this one, I don't know how many people have seen this before, but this is done by Berkeley. And why do companies patent? And this is actually very good, because this really tells you the reasons why anybody would buy your patents as well. Right? You've got preventing others from copying products, improving the chances of securing investment, right? Whether it's seed round to first round, or whether it's mezzanine, or whether it's going IPO. Improved chances of this one's right there, IPO. Enhancing the company reputation and the product image. Particularly in the consumer space, you have patents that people kind of leverage that from a marketing angle. This is patent pending technology. These are patents that prevent others from doing the same thing. We are unique, we are differentiated. Improving negotiating position with other companies, for example, cross-licenses. Preventing attacks, right? Infringement actions against the company. And obtaining licensing revenues. It's pretty much the kind of the list of why companies patent. And it's not just about companies patenting themselves, but nowadays to fill the gap that is developed in many product areas, companies don't have time and they'll buy stuff as well. Yesterday, I heard directly quotes from people, which I put down for another presentation, but basically, CEO was telling me, we don't have time to build these patents ourselves. We need to buy these patents. We can't lose the time. We've got to get it done now. So that's why the buying is a real option today, and that's why selling and monetizing in that way is a real option today. And since we are, here sponsored by SIIA, I thought it would be good to just point out on the software side that traditionally the thinking has been that software is not that important on the patent side. But today, especially with this example, a lot more is going on in software than you would have imagined. I've seen a lot of patents being bought and sold in the software space in the last couple of years. And this Software 100 report also saying the same kind of thing. During the past 12 months, we've seen an increase in software patent deals and software patent battles. This is just, again, just a little data point. I don't want to dwell on it too much. Lots is going on globally as well. In recent news, this actually came to me from a client of ours. He said, hey, do you know about this? Because we need to sell patents to these guys. ZTE suing Ericsson in China. Lenovo and ZTE and some others, including smaller companies like TCL, getting together to stop Apple and Microsoft lawsuits. So this is happening in the market today. The market is a dynamic space, and the dimensions that influence the evolution of the patent market. This is one look, my look at this, is you've got patent law and patent reform. That's one influencer, big influencer. You've got the patent wars. And these are in different regions, markets, products, and technologies. It could be mobile wireless, it could be networking, it could be cloud computing. Cloud computing is a really hot area right now. And it can be the patent monetization ecosystem. So, for example, new NPEs are joining the ecosystem all the time. How many people have heard of Pendrel? Pendrel is buying patents right now. Lots of patents, as an example. So these are the dimensions, and I'm sure there are others as well. Media is a dimension, funnily enough. It's kind of a dotted dimension. Why? Because when things come up in the newspapers and in the media, the C-suite, CXOs, CTOs, CEOs, they take notice. It's not just a matter for the IP guy sitting inside the company in the legal department caring about this. When he gets a call from the CEO, when the GC gets a call from the CEO, hey, we've got to do something with our patent, what are we doing? People take notice. And so the media also affects the evolution in some way. But I want to give you a quick market summary, and then we'll get into the meat of the monetization. First thing is, there's a lot more visibility today and a lot more wars going on, more awareness in the C-suite. There's a continued bunch of acquisitions going on of patents as well as applications. 3 years ago, when I got into this business, 3-4 years ago, apps were not seen as important. Literally this month and last month, I've got calls from a variety of our clients and buyers. I want apps. I want apps because I want to be able to strategically prosecute those apps and mold them in the direction I want. So I'm not saying apps are going to be worth more than the patents, but definitely there is an increase in strategic prosecution is seen as a valuable tool. More foreign applications or more foreign patents. Startups are buying patents. I've talked to multiple social media startups who are afraid that they'll launch in and they'll get attacked. They want to protect themselves. More aggregators are out there. RPX is out there, Pendrel is out there, other companies as well. And surprisingly enough, we're also seeing more acquisitions of companies. So, companies got 5 great patents. It costs $3 million to buy those. It costs $5 million to buy the company, to buy its assets, and to buy the people, and have them work on more patents. They'll pay the 5 and take the company with them. That's happening more and more. So it's become like a feed to M&A as well. And as I said before, software is becoming increasingly valuable. Okay, so let's get to the meat of monetization. So what is this? How many people think it's the glass half full?
Sure.
It's actually a beaker. I think it's a beaker. It's not a glass. But this is for a scientist, truly a scientist, right? So the optimist says glass is half full, yeah. Pessimist, oh, it's half empty, half empty. But what does a patent attorney say? Liquid H2O bisects an open cylindrical vessel. Okay. The lawyers amongst you, I know, will find this very funny. Okay, so I thought it was interesting. I felt like that 5 years ago. It's like 20 years ago, I used to work in IBM Labs. developing IP, right? And it was always funny when we got something to be disclosed, because then suddenly the language starts changing. What's going on? I was trying to say this, and now I'm saying something else. But it is funny. So what kind of patents are out there for sale today? When we talk about monetization, to give you an idea, right? Microprocessors, memory, power management, network and systems management, MEMS, video, internet video, SaaS, cloud computing, pretty hot stuff. Touch is really hot. You touch it and it sizzles and burns your finger. This is one way of looking at it. Up at the top you've got the lava stuff. Mobile is really hot. Social is getting crazy. Internet video is getting crazy. E-commerce is pretty hot. On the bottom there, manufacturing is pretty cold. That's the tundra, picture of the tundra. Hopefully, Obama will do something about manufacturing and it'll start getting hotter. It might. And I have a trivia question for you though. How hot is the lava coming out of that volcano? It's not a trick question, come on. It's either in Fahrenheit or it's in centigrade for our European friends. Please.
2000 Fahrenheit?
Oh, good. That was good, Carl. Very, very good. That's exactly right. 2000 is in that range, 1800 to 2000, 2200 Fahrenheit. Really hot, right?
What's that in Celsius?
What was that? That's in Fahrenheit. In Celsius, it's 1000 roughly. 1000. So, okay, so you really need to know that if you're going to understand about patent monetization. What are the benefits for a company, right, to monetize their patents? Saving of costs. So some companies will have portfolios of hundreds or thousands even of patents, and selling off those patents that are sitting there and absorbing maintenance fees and are not critical to the business, that'll save them money. Strategic alignment, very important. The IP kind of exercise of looking at the portfolio and culling it also helps you align your business and your IP to your strategy. What are the areas we really need to go after? Ooh, we're going after these areas. If we're going after these areas, we're going to have some gaps. Oh, those gaps need to be filled. Oh, I need to buy stuff as well. I need to buy stuff to fill the gaps, or I need to develop stuff to fill the gaps. It helps you to, get some high margin revenues coming in. There are examples I can give you of companies, big companies, not far from Palo Alto, that have divisions that would probably sell some patents and make profits that quarter because they've sold those patents. Okay, so high margin revenues is an important benefit. And then sharpening the focus on who the competition is, because believe me, in the C-suite, they want to know, if they're going to go into the mobile space, who's going to attack them. I've got a great marketing strategy. I've got GTM, go to market. I've got great products. I've got great technologies, great engineers, wonderful sales force. I don't have any IP in that space. Is there going to be a problem? Probably. Right? All the other things are great. You're on there like a Boy Scout. You're out there and you get attacked on the IP front. So how do you get to monetization? So this is kind of like a simple kind of three-step kind of way of looking at it. First thing is determining the IP strategy, and the IP strategy is very much tied into the business needs. What are the needs of the business? Where's the business headed? What products are they going to produce? What markets are they going to go after? How are they going to differentiate themselves in those markets? How are they going to keep out the guys who are going to try to come in and beat you up? That's part of the IP strategy. The second part is determining the monetization approach. Is it going to be licensing? Is it going to be sales of the IP? Is it going to be a combination of that? And then how are you going to go to market, GTM, go to market for your monetization? Who are the companies you're going to target? Who are the channels you're going to engage? Now, there are a lot of companies out there, like us, for example, like Countertech, and others, who will actually help sell the IP. Who are those people that you will engage with? And the last piece is executing the monetization. I should really pull this up because this gives you a kind of simpler feel for how you figure out which patents you're going to keep. Those that you need for offensive reasons, for defensive reasons, and for strategic needs. But the non-strategic ones, those are the ones that you will sell off as a company. This is an example of product areas. So a more complex company multiple business units, whether it's $1 billion company, whether it's a $10 billion company, may have businesses in different areas. This example says you've got cameras, enterprise printers, and digital frames. And those businesses are not static, they're always moving. And as you move those businesses, different gaps might occur, holes might occur that need to be filled. If you're moving around and you're trying to defend the business, there are three basic approaches to defend. You can be aggressive, you can be proactive, or you can be reactive. I'll give you examples. Google was reactive. They went out, Android, go crazy with this stuff, got attacked pretty badly, realized they needed patents, went out and started buying patents. That's a reactive approach. I'll predict something right now. Companies like Amazon, what do you think is going to happen there? With Fire, with Kindle, reactive, right? There are other companies, though, examples like companies like Qualcomm, who are proactive and also aggressive. And aggressive really is, proactive would be buying stuff and being ready for attacks. Aggressive will be buying stuff or making stuff and going out and attacking before you actually get attacked. So there are various ways to defend the fronts that you have for their product areas. And I'm just giving you these concepts because this is, you can see this in the behaviors of the companies. So which patents do we sell? We keep the ones we need for defense, for offense, and for strategic trajectories. We sell the ones that are non-strategic, where the maintenance costs are prohibitive, and the ones that we frankly don't have need for, or, believe it or not, frankly, some of them, understand them. What was this? We made these patents, I don't even know, nobody even understands it anymore in this company. Sell these off. This is an example of a typical kind of sales process timeline. So when you're actually selling patents, it's not really that straightforward. It's a complex beast to sell. In some people have compared patents to houses, selling real estate. The thing about a house is that you buy a house and you can adapt it. I'll get rid of this bedroom, I'll break this wall, I'll make this into a bigger room, I'll add another room here. With patents, it's going to be hard to do. You might end up with patents and applications, and you can do some of that with some of the malleable applications around those patents, yes. But patents themselves, fairly unique, and a lot of factors that determine how valuable they are, and especially to you. You're basically trying to sell, and you're selecting the patents you're selling from your company. You're doing a technical review. You're obtaining some reverse engineering, look at the file histories, prior art review. There's a lot of things that have to be done to kind of get it ready. You're then getting out there, going to market, and creating a sales package, working with the buyers. And then comes the interesting part of negotiating. Every contract I've ever worked on, and I've worked on 100 plus contracts, everyone is different. It's crazy. Everybody wants something different. Every corporation wants something slightly different with something else. It's just very interesting the way this process goes. Due diligence is performed in a very similar to an M&A style manner, and then you've got the close at the end. But the process can easily take about six months. I've seen deals go through, fastest deal I've seen go through for a handful of patents, less than 10, is 3 weeks. And the slowest deal I think I know of is like 2 or 3 years. And it's because the seller just kept changing their mind, and 3 years later they sold the IP. So you can see it's very variable. But as I was saying, things can affect the value of those patents, and there are some of the things that can affect the values. The first one is observability, which is how do you detect, what it is the patent is doing, and what is it doing in a product, in a real product. And it is hard to detect some patents or the use of those patents in a product. Just because it's software, for example, not that easy to find, especially if all you've got is object code. How do you know what method is being used? But industry demand, so for example, the lava stuff I showed you, as well as the quality of the patent, the strength of the claims, those are some of the important areas in this list. How many licenses have you got? Also workarounds. I mean, there are patents that you might think are very valuable, and then the company can quickly adjust the software slightly. If you read the news, you'll find that in the recent battles in the mobile space, HTC and even Samsung have actually pointed out that they're doing workarounds now, to work around the description of the functionality in the patent. Not change the patent, but change the functionality to work around that potential infringement that they might have. Okay, so we're here to the 6 examples now. I want to kind of go through these fairly quickly. The first example is IP funding. This was a real example. I've tried to not give all the details away and the names of the people concerned. But the situation was this company needed another round of funding. The business wasn't doing that great. It was hard for them to get funding at a reasonable valuation. They divested their patents and they got a grant back license to those patents. So basically, you sell your patents, but you get a grant back to them so that you're protected. You can no longer offend or be offensive with those patents. You cannot assert them against other people. You cannot prevent other people from entering that space. But it's unlikely someone's going to come to you and say, hey, you're infringing this patent because you've already got protection. So in this example, they were able to create an extra revenue of about $2 million. Gave them extra runway to profits. Here's another example. This happens all the time. Company wanting to exit. They've done some good things, but they haven't really made money. They know that bankruptcy is around the corner. Really, Kodak is kind of an example in this because they should have moved a little faster. Because they should have probably sold this stuff earlier so they wouldn't have got into bankruptcy. Because if you do that, you actually get more money. Now what's happening is people are just waiting. They're just waiting for the price to come down, right? Because I'm going to pick this up at $100 million. It's worth $800 million, I'll pick it up at 100. So these guys moved fast. They were able to get about $4 million. They shared it with their investors, etc. I don't think everybody was made whole, but I think they did okay. Much better than if they'd gone into bankruptcy. Reset, IP reset. This is a very simple example. Happens all the time. Small companies, medium-sized companies, and huge companies. I need to change my strategy. I'm changing my strategy. I'm no longer going after this space. By the way, I'm selling my company or my division in this space. If I do that, I'm selling the patents with them. Oh, I've got some leftover ones that are now irrelevant to our strategy. What am I going to do with those? In this example, the company sold 10% of their portfolio. They bought other patents to defend themselves in the new markets. And they actually, I think, are having now they have a very dynamic IP strategy, buying and selling continuously. So it sort of woke up their IP group to continuously, be in tandem with the business strategy. So this one really is a combination of aligning with the business, acquisitions, divestments, and then repeat and rinse and repeat. Really, it does happen that way. It's just a repeat. Because once they know that this is what they need to do, they can't stop and stand still. They have to keep looking at their stuff every quarter and keep doing that. Example number 4, IP income. Companies do this today. In fact, this example is from a public company that was a client, and with $1 billion plus revenues in the semiconductor space. And they were trying to decide, they spent a couple of years actually selling stuff sporadically. I'll sell a 2 million here, 3 million here, 5 million. CFO, CEO looking at the charts, oh yeah, this is 80% margin. Wow, this is pretty good stuff. But we normally only make, whatever margin, 40%. Idea came up, okay, why don't we make this into a constant theme so that you can declare this on the P&L because it's a public company. Great idea, they've done it. They now sell about $1 million every quarter continuously. Just extra profit on the bottom line, basically. Protection. Entering a new market. The mobile is a great example of this. Very contentious space. We need to proactively protect. We're not going to be aggressive. We're not going to go out and sue people, but we need to proactively protect. And so this company bought $5 million worth of patents. And so they are aggressive, proactive, reactive. This is more of the proactive approach. Example number 6, IP boost. Again, trying to get to an IPO or to get further funding. and want to maximize their dollars. This company actually boosted their valuation by about $3 to $5 million. So they spent $2 million, but boosted their valuation by double in this particular example. And I've seen it go higher. I've seen an LED company, for example, buy patents, and they had about 20 patents, roughly. They bought about 10 patents, and the next round of funding was better for them, in terms of, how much they have to give away, percentage-wise. Okay, so what we've talked about in monetization is essentially, typically when you're building a business, you're trying to get value kind of down here after the innovation has happened or is happening. But with the advent of the IP market and the fluidity of the market, you're kind of creating value earlier that you can actually monetize. And that's the difference, I think. With high tech and with patents today, you can actually get some monetization without having to go through the whole gamut of producing innovation and going right to the end. Because somebody else might pick up your patents here, and they might plug them back in here and keep going until they get there. So for them, it's a necessary piece of the puzzle that they need to create that value. Question?
Yeah. With regard to the selling of non-strategic patents, of non-important patents, proactively or opportunistically, companies selling off patents that they don't need for whatever reason. What changes in behavior are you seeing? What kind of trends are you seeing? Are more people opportunistically selling patents now, and what is driving that?
Okay. So what I'm seeing, or what we're seeing, is that more companies, more people at the top levels of companies are asking the question, what are we doing with our IP? They're becoming more aware of it. I think that's producing some pressure lower down, and people are relooking. I had a conversation yesterday with a very large, billions of dollars worth company, where the head of their IP said to me, we really are trying to break out of the box right now. And you would think that we would only buy patents in this space. They were in a particular space. I don't want to say. But we also want this and this and this. And the week before, I got a call from somebody saying they want patents that read on another large manufacturer of computers. And they're not in the computing space. So you would never have thought that that company, not in the computer space, would want to buy patents in that space. You'd never have connected the two together. So I think what's happening is there's more realization that IP and patents is not just something that the technical guys and the lawyers do. It's something that can be used strategically across the business. And I think there is more of that happening. There's more companies are realizing they can get money from those patents. Does that help answer the question?
Well, that's helpful in terms of understanding why people are buying patents.
Yes.
In spaces that are not, part of their present business. But I'm curious about whether you have observed, since you see a lot of transactions, I'm curious about whether you have observed companies opportunistically selling them more, saying, hey, we got this 10%, let's go sell it, as opposed to just, we got other things to do with our time and engineering resources rather than preparing the patents for sale.
I think the answer to that is in general, it's yes. People are doing that. But here's the problem that you find. A lot of companies, they don't know what they've got. Mm-hmm. It's sometimes, but the bigger the company, the more complex it is. I mean, you go to a big company, and you'd be amazed. You'd think that, hey, they've got their act together. They know what IP they've got and what they don't need. They don't know that. Mm-hmm. They're probably working through it. Maybe they've worked through one phase of it. Maybe the one business unit now knows that these patents that are to do with, let's say, gesturing. I'm not in the gesturing business. I never will be in the next 10 years. Let's sell these. So I think that's the block right now. And some of that block is being counteracted by companies and even legal firms who are helping companies come up with an analysis of their portfolio and saying, hey, this is what your portfolio looks like. Then somebody looks at that and says, okay, these are the pieces we don't need. But it's much less structured than you think it is.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Question.
So related to that question, I mean, do you see buyers being skeptical. If a company has basically said, I've got this product line, I'm going to sell off the patents that I think are not valuable to my products, do you see buyers being skeptical of that, thinking the patents themselves must be therefore of little value because the company is holding on to the ones that are really valuable?
Yes, that's a very good point. And I've come across that many times. So, companies will say, yeah, why are you selling it? That's the first question, right? Somebody's selling a car. Why are you selling it? You don't like the car? Something's wrong with the car? What is wrong with this car? And do you have a Carfax? And probably you don't have a Carfax. But the thing is that it happens a lot. It happens a lot. However, sometimes it's fairly obvious. If you've got a company who's got patents in fuel cells, and the company is in the computer business, what happened here? Oh yeah, we're just creating a lot of stuff. This one, we ended up creating this. It's good, but we're not using it. Makes sense. Or same kind of thing, medical components, medical devices. You're making medical devices, but you're in the software business. What happened there? Well, we started this project, we got this business going, and now we decided not to. But you're right, it does happen. The funny thing about that is that sometimes the skepticism comes from inside the company. So that the CEO or the chief technology officer, whoever might turn around and say, these patents, what are you going to do with them? We don't know what to do with these patents. You can't sell these. Oh, but you can. Oh, no, I don't. The problem or the interesting thing that I've found in the last 5 years is the patent's beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. There's a package of patents that I helped to sell that was worth $5 million that was going to be lapsed. Completely lapsed. Because everybody, the technical guys, everybody had done the analysis and said, okay, these are going nowhere. And within a few weeks, buyers were found, buyers were interested, paid the money. The company's like, how did that happen? Well, you don't need to know how it happened. The point is, they like the patents, they want the patents.
From my internal observation, I think, for example, with Google, Google business model is on the search engine. And then when Rich Miner went into developing their Android, and it catapulted, that strategy has shifted, and they gained customers, and they didn't put emphasis on, mobile patents, but they gained so much customers. But with, Motorola, they had strong market presence in the 80s and in early 90s, but with Motorola, they don't feel like they're going to gain that customer, back, because the market has shifted for them. But their patents are very legitimate, or still valuable, and that's why Google bought it, because they got the customer now. If Motorola could jump and get back and get the customer base again, then of course they want to keep those patents. But I think internally they probably were thinking, there's no way we're going to shift the market with what we have in our resources, so we got to sell what we have. And that's my interpretation, because if you look at RIM too, RIM had a good market presence, but they lost the customer. They couldn't shift into newer technology, like the iPhone and the Android with the mobile app application platform. And I think that's why those companies had to sell, because they ain't going to get those. They're not going to get customer base like they used to have. And I think it's all driven by customer, because Google, their search engine is so powerful, and that was their bread and butter. But with Motorola and with their Android platform, they gained the customers. So they did the reactive, because now we got the base. Now we got the money to buy all these patents, because if they invest in all these patents, I don't have the customer base to buy it, but now they do. That's how I perceive it, because Motorola was one of my customers way back in the 90s.
That's a great observation, Carl, because basically you've got companies adjusting dynamically.
Yep.
And the thing is that markets and the business world is dynamic. You have to adjust dynamically, and if you don't adjust to it, it'll adjust you out of the ecosystem, right? Mm-hmm. So that's, if you're not good at one particular part, look at what happened with Nokia. Nokia was a leader in the cell phone game, right? 400 million units, 40% of the market, basically. And they're having some struggles right now. And they have to reinvent themselves. And actually, Nokia is a very interesting company because in the 1800s, they're from the 1800s. They've reinvented themselves every few years, so I'm sure they'll reinvent themselves. But it's constant reinvention, and patents play a part in that because they're tied to the invention stream, and then that's tied to the innovation stream. Sorry, there were two other questions. I'll take the one in the back first, only because the hand went up first.
Hi. It's more a comment than a question about the internal discussions within the company as to whether to sell or not to sell. What I've observed is that on the legal team, typically there's a reluctance to take risks, and so selling is a risk. You don't know what could happen if you sell, and so that's one factor. Another factor is the founders or the inventors of the patents, if they're still in the management team. They may have an effective relationship with a patent. It's like a trophy. So there's a, why would you sell your family jewels, if you will, type of concept. And then there are people who look at this very matter-of-factly. So the new CEO or CFO will say, "This is an asset. We've sold a building. Let's sell those assets." So these are some of the things that I've observed as far as the interplay of what ultimately results in the decision of a company to sell the patents.
Very good inputs. Thank you.
Yeah, I was actually wanted to refer to one earlier statement that you said. The value of the patent is in the eyes of the beholder, and that's a very significant aspect of patent valuation, I would assume, because depending on what is the state of the market, and depending on what is the level of interest among potential buyers, your patent value would go up and down. Now, given that, I mean, isn't it time ripe to have some sort of system that brings in more transparency into what the patent really is, and what are certain guidelines about the evaluation? Maybe the Carfax that you mentioned.
Right.
Why can't there be a industry standard Carfax for all kinds of patents? And in which case, you can actually set up a platform where you can trade patents.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be a one-to-one transaction. It can be a many-to-many transaction going on depending on who's more interested at a certain point in time.
That's a great.
I wonder why that's not happening.
Well, yeah, there's plenty of IP brokers out there.
Well, let me give you my perspective on that. There are, as Carl points out, there are people who try to do it. There are people who try to do it. They've tried to do sort of eBay-style thing for patents. There's one I know of, an exchange called IPXI out of Chicago, that I believe was involved somehow with Ocean Tomo and ICAP. And I think that part of the problem is, and by the way, Ocean Tomo, they do auctions online, right? Kind of a free advert for them. But it's hard to sell patents because of the complexity and the uniqueness of them. That's part of the challenge. There's so much due diligence involved. It's almost like trying to sell a company lock, stock, and barrel very easily with a click of a button, click of a mouse online. It's just not doable today. There's too many other things, and too many things that need to be reviewed and assessed and understood. But I think the point of having that right now is fulfilled by a number of intermediaries who help to make the connections. They're going to find something here, they'll connect it to something here. If somebody's telling them to buy something, they'll try to find that. So it's happening more organically today through multiple parties. But you're right. Ultimately, that would be a fantastic thing to have, the eBay for patents. But it's going to be challenging. But it'll probably happen at some point. Sorry, three people almost at the same time. Let me take this one first because you went up first.
Yeah, right. I was thinking when open source software enters like a new segment or an area where it's previously been small, how do you think that affects the strategy and the value and so on happens in that segment?
In the software segment?
Yeah, maybe in a sub-segment, like a particular area. Not software, definitely.
So sorry, what's the question? How does the...
Well, if you're in a sector where it's been a lot of proprietary solutions, and suddenly open source is gaining ground in that sector, how would that affect the IP strategy for the companies in that particular?
It's a really interesting question. I mean, open source. There's if you're using open source in the development of your software in your company, then that can be a challenge in trying to sell that IP. Whether it's the software, certainly your patents will not be, you can't actually disclose patents if you have a problem in terms of multiple owners or owners that you don't even know who the owners are. So that's a challenge. Yeah, that would not be something that in the current system, unless others have other thoughts on this. Happy to have inputs on that.
Well, I mean, to me, with open source, application, because I wonder that, of course, back then, in the early days, we were very hardware driven. And only when Bill Gates is one of the leaders in software said that software is the future, right? And so I wonder if the software industry realized from the hardware industry, if we patent way too much, then we're kind of locked ourselves in. And that's why open source software have become a big play, since 2000, because, there is some barrier. I mean, IP is great once you own it and you have the market and you have the customer base. But if you don't, then IP can be a hindrance of innovation. I love innovation, but there's a lot of things that I've seen that could be improved, but IPs kind of gets in the way. And of course, all the lawsuits and potential lawsuits that that hovers around the IP market, it hinder innovation. So there's that struggle between almost good and evil kind of thing. And I was wondering that's why open source is so big these days.
Open source is definitely getting bigger. Let me just take a question from Richard first. You put your hand up.
I was going to just comment on what this gentleman said. I think it was at the ICAP meeting in San Francisco last year. One of the panelists said, why don't we have the patents the equivalent of an MLS, multiple listing service that we see for real estate? I think one of the reasons for that is that the value of a patent is a kind of future prospective value, and it depends on the business
driven by perceptions
and the market also that's going to evolve over the life of that patent, 10, 15 years maybe. And a lot of it is going to be predicated on potential licensing value, and a lot of licensing deals are just not publicly known. So numbers are actually just not known. So it's very hard to put an objectively quantifiable value on a particular patent. Then you also have the aggregation effect, which is that some patents individually can be extremely valuable, but then in other respects, a product being such a composite product, particularly cell phones and so on, have thousands of patents covering them. The value comes from aggregation of lots of patents. So it's something a lot of people, I think, are working towards, coming up with some kind of metrics, but it's a long way off.
Or a way to classify patents in certain groups.
Yeah, we may
lend
not
themselves more to standardization.
Yeah, we may not get there even in 10 years.
Yeah, I suspect you're right.
Currently, I work for angel investor groups. In a way, I see certain business or investment opportunity. I also assisted a certain startup high-tech industry. My question to you is, what would you suggest? I met so many so-called founder, technical guys. They file 1 or 2 patents. They don't have enough money to even maintain or file more patents. Rather, they just file a provisional application. A small amount of money, right? Waiting for only 1 year. If they can raise money upfront, and they can file more patents. But the question is, very often they say, well, when I put in those potential patent filing opportunity into my business plan, that may scare the so-called potential investor. Say, well, the investor may say, well, you raise money, probably 90% of the money or 80% of my money put into patent filing without pushing product out to the marketplace. What would you suggest in terms of my position? I'm helping them, but also seeking certain investment opportunity for them. So back and forth, how could they explore that kind of
It's not an easy question to answer because it really depends on the situation that the company is in. There could be a situation, and I've come across this sometimes, where the company has not really got a great chance of getting the product produced to the market, have a sales team, and expand that business on their own. They probably won't be able to do that. But the technology that they're creating works. The IP that they've created will have value to it. And if they want to exit that company or sell it on to somebody else or get it acquired, it's best to focus on the IP and the technology with the strength that they have and then get the maximum out of it. On the other hand, there are companies who will go the distance and they will get money at every round. And maybe, it's kind of one of those balance things. It's almost, it's not quite the same thing, but same thing as saying almost like, how much money do I put in my sales and marketing effort, how much do I put into my R&D and engineering effort? It's almost similar in some ways. I mean, in the example where the company does go all the way, maybe they can save some of that money to make sure that they're focused in on the core IP that they absolutely need to be successful in the market, and maybe not do the peripheral stuff. If they do provisionals, the one good thing is they can do a little bit of hedging, a little bit of insurance at a cheap price, buy themselves a year, buy themselves some time. If they see that those are good patents, if the market for them doesn't take off, they can build those into applications or into full applications and patents and have some value there. And if it doesn't, if it does take off, then they can maybe afford to do that through money that comes in, or they might want to just keep expanding the sales and marketing route. So it kind of depends on the company and how much that IP is going to be worth for that company. That first picture I put up there, which had the quadrants of different types of aspects of the company, patents, is it going to be a small part of it or is it going to be a big part of it? And you have to kind of somehow assess the likelihood of the company being successful. Is it a more R&D driven, IP-centric type of a play, or is it more of a market-driven sales GTM type of a organization? And how do you balance that? It's just very hard to say just off like that, but I think that's one way you could look at it. Okay. I should probably look at the time. Are we okay on time? We've got 5 more minutes? Yeah? I should probably go on to the next, just the next section here. This is not meant to be exhaustive, but some of the things to think about, when you've got patents in your company, you want to build a virtuous cycle. You want to basically evaluate what your portfolio looks like. Where are the gaps? Where are the needs? That comes back to your strategy. And the strategy might be that, I'm going to create a really good, strong portfolio for these products I have today. I'm going to build, I'm going to buy. I'm going to file as quickly as I can because of first to file. And in these product areas, I'm going to try to be quite offensive. These areas I might be very defensive. You then look at monetizing the pieces you don't need. So monetizing those that you really don't need, reinvesting, whether it's building or buying, and then constantly evaluating. So that's kind of a cycle. That's a cycle that has to happen in the IP part of your company, and basically the C-suite has to evaluate this, sometimes on a quarterly basis and sometimes less often than that.
But the maintenance is on every quarter, right?
The maintenance depends. I mean, the maintenance, you pay fees, and the fees can be every few years, and there's some major fees that end up being paid. It can be in the, 10,000, 15,000. It varies. And it also depends on whether you've got foreigns or not. You might have to keep your patents in Germany, France, and Korea and Japan, up to date as well, and that costs a lot of money. So there's a lot. When you start getting large portfolios, you're talking about sometimes millions, if not hundreds of millions a year, even in costs. Maybe not hundreds, but definitely in the tens of millions. So so what does this mean in terms of strategic action? I mean, the action can be to sell your patents, extract value from those patents that might be about to lapse or they might be irrelevant, buying patents to fill in the holes where you want to be defensive. Or if you actually want to be assertive and you want to go out there and get some guys, then you might want to make sure those cracks are covered with patents that you either buy or you produce. In other words, you write. But divestment and acquisition of technologies is another component, to the patent component as well. You may have acquired technologies and they may have come with patents that were not relevant to what you need for the business. What do you want to do? You want to divest those. On the other hand, areas that you're acquiring in, you may want to acquire patents in those areas as well to help you differentiate your offerings. So, kind of the last slide really, and I think this dial says it all. I mean, what you really want to do is you want to maximize the return on your IP and maximize that. And the first part, I'll restate this, is really to understand the business strategy. The IP strategy is no good without the business strategy. The IP strategy is subservient to the business strategy. It can sometimes help to invent the business strategy, in fact. I mean, you can actually take the IP strategy and say, okay, this is going to be our strategy for our company. Or this is where we've got strength, so we should move more in this direction. So you can do that, but you must have a clear business strategy, and it must be aligned. Staying ahead on the IP in the IP game, divest those non-strategic assets, redeploy the dollars into strategic plays. It's all about getting the best use of the IP for your business, acquiring assets for protection and for offensive capability in the sensitive areas where you identify there will be gaps and there will be people who will attack you. There has to be several conditions that are met. Extending your IP capability is very important, and then the most important thing, of course, all of this is making the business succeed. Whether you are selling patents to make the business succeed, or whether you're buying patents, or whether you're writing them, it's all about making sure your business succeeds. Question?
So, question. On one of your earlier slides, you had that it takes about 6 to 12 months to sell a patent.
Yes.
Each patent is different, and due diligence involved. So, what is your estimate of the cost that it takes to sell a patent?
Okay. So, don't take that slide too literally. So it could be that patents might sell in 3 months or 4 months or 5 months. That was a kind of a typical timeline. The other thing to remember is that patents are sold usually in a lot or in a kind of a small segment. So you may have some related patents. So you may have a family of patents. You may have a couple of families. You may have something that's in software, kind of a chunk of patents. So it's not as though you're going to spend 6 months selling one of those, each of those. You take those 10 and you try to sell those, and they sell within 3, 6, 7, 8 months, whatever. But just to answer the rest of the question, the cost. So, if you're doing it in-house and you're doing it yourself, the cost is one of your own time and effort to locate the potential buyers, make sure that you've got some of the collateral and the understanding of the strengths of your patents put together, and then communicating with those buyers and making sure that they are coming on board, they're reviewing it in time and all of that. So that's the cost if you're doing it yourself. If you're doing it using a brokering firm, you may pay a certain percentage fee, like a contingency fee. It might be 20%, it might be 30%. I've even seen it as high as 50% in some cases. So, there could be that as well. You may also have another part to this, which is you may say, okay, I'm going to sell it myself, but it's going to cost me some money because I'm not a legal expert. I'm going to have to hire somebody to kind of write some of the evidence of use or some of the claim charts. That could be another cost that we may have to pay externally, maybe $10,000, $20,000, $50,000. We've had $50,000 go out just for one package, just to get it written up so that it can be sold. So there's kind of a variety of things that involve the costs.
I was wondering, could you elaborate on the valuation of a patent, either individual or package? Because, for example, with RIM and then with Motorola Mobility, the valuation of the company has gone, tremendously down, but their IP is still, at a higher point. So how does it get evaluated? I know it's got to be based on the market, right? So what is the percentage, of, let's say the market is 100% and the company is 10%, but their IP is 20%. So how does it get justified what the value of their IP is in terms of the company, in terms of the market valuation?
So, it's very hard to assess the value in a technical way. You can assess the value, you can assess a range, but at the end of the day, it's a market. And as long as you can put it in front of the right people who may have interest in it, and sometimes the people, you don't know that they're going to have interest in it. You may have a portfolio in, let's say, cloud computing or in network storage, and you kind of go after all the networking storage companies. And suddenly you get somebody coming to you and saying, okay, well, I'd like to buy this, and you find out that they're in, web software of some kind. It's like, well, I didn't know that they would be interested. So, I think basically you kind of have valuation is kind of an art. It's not a science, and it's the market that really, in the end, decides. As long as you've got it in front of all the right buyers, the buyers should be able to come back and say, this is worth so and so to me. This is what, if you look at the sale of Nortel patents, who would have imagined that in that year, when the overall sales of patents were going to be in the range of around $2 billion worth transacted in that year, that you'd suddenly get a dark horse coming in at 4.5 billion, pushing up the market size to like 3 times what we thought it was going to be that year. Who would have gathered that? Nobody. Were the patents really worth that much each patent? Don't know. But that consortium certainly thought it was. And they were willing to do that to keep the patents out of the hands of other people as well. It's a bunch of those factors. Remember that picture I put up with the 3 dimensions?
Yeah.
The law, the market, and the ecosystem? Some things are pulling at all times, and it's unpredictable But you can come up with some assessment. You can say this is going to be the range, but you can be surprised. And you can be surprised either way. Sometimes you might find that this is really great, it's going to hit people, and you find that there's just not enough buyers for that. That happens less likely nowadays. And the other one is, you find more buyers, they start competing against each other, and sometimes it becomes like competition between companies. I need to have this. Apple, Google, because they're fighting something out. I need to have this, and more and more and more. It keeps going up and up, and you thought you were going to get 100 million, and you end up getting $1 billion for that portfolio. So again, it's hard. It's hard to set a limit on it, but you can do your best using some of those technical things I showed you as well. You can kind of say this is kind of the range, but at the end of the day, it's in the market. People start. The other thing I found is sometimes you wait 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, and suddenly the market changes, and what was worth less before suddenly has value. That happens as well, and that's kind of a crazy thing. I've actually come to the end of this, but I want to show you one little thing which I might have here. It's like this is not meant to be super analytical, but you can actually look at the value of a patent over its lifetime. And you can graph it out sometimes. And this is not exhaustive. But you can have this typical one, which is, I call it the hill. You can kind of have a little hill. I call this the wall because the patent, soon after it came out, wow, boom, price went up. And it doesn't go down again until, maybe 18 years in its life. 20 years is a lifetime, right, of a patent. Or you might have something that's just kind of hovering around like that, but suddenly, something happens in the market. LTE takes off. All the 4G stuff becomes really important. WiMAX isn't that important anymore. Boom. Or it was important early on, and then it starts losing value. That's the kind of thing, again, it's an art, not a science, that you can kind of look at that. Sometimes you can say, okay, these patents are behaving in this way, or this is the kind of area it might have at this kind of behavior. I don't know where I was now. I was kind of at the end of my presentation, I think.
Can a patent be a product, for example? Like how product innovation, you bring out a product and you innovate it, and then so it has another life, it continues upward. Does patent have that kind of life where, like, it gradually grows and then it kind of plateau, but you reinforce the patent and it just has more, then it has more value and it goes up again?
Yeah, I mean, you may not change the patent, but the patent might have value that changes over time. It's not something like a product that you can keep tweaking and changing. Now, if you've got applications and you've got a family of patents, then you can make some changes in that way. But typically, you're not changing it on an as-need basis.
If you look at the pharma business, a lot of companies are playing around with that same principle, trying to extend the life of the patent to improve on your revenue streams.
Right.
I mean, I don't know if they add on patents, but they take an existing patent and just stretch it up.
Right.
The pharma business would add probably a different type of curve to your chart. It would be one that basically sort of goes up sharply in the middle when the product hits the market and stays high, and maybe you can just choose increasing right to the last day of the patent term.
That's right.
Because they just, they're selling their $1 billion drug and they're reaching very every day until that patent expires. Yeah,
that was like the wall. The wall kind of goes up very quickly, and then it kind of stays almost all the way to the end. Yeah. Okay, so I think this is good. I mean, I'm glad that all the questions have come in real time, and so we don't really have to do a Q&A, but I am willing to do a Q&A and be here for the next few minutes as well if you want anybody wants to talk about anything else. Another question?
Just one question. Yeah. If you have a patent that is critical to a certain business, what sets the level that you can get in licensing? Like what percentage of the revenue of a product could go to that kind of critical patent?
Okay, so that's again a complex one because it really depends on the area that you're in. As you know, different industries have different profit margins, right? So if you go into software business, you might have anywhere from 60 to 80% margins, or networking business, depending on who you are. If you're Cisco, you might be at 60 or 65%, or if you're somebody else, it might be smaller than that. The licensing value that you can get derived from patents or from IP is going to be dependent on a number of factors. That's one of the factors: which market it is, what the products are, how much the patent might read, on what aspect of the product it reads, how important is that aspect of the product. It could be a small percentage. It could be a small percentage of the gross margin. It could be a small percentage of the profit that you might get. I'll throw out a number though. Rates in high commodity markets, like I'll just throw it out, PCs, for example, is going to be low, 0.2% or 0.5% of the net, or maybe the gross profit. And then maybe in something where you've got pure software, like some web technologies or some application software, it could be maybe 1%. Again, of the gross profit. So it sort of varies, and there are many factors. I don't want to make it seem as though it's simple, but I'm just trying to give you a very simple thumb, kind of a rule of thumb type of thing. Small, very small percentage usually, because even that impacts the business, who's making the sale, because now it's an extra drag that they perceive that they've got on the profit, on the P&L that they've got to make.
On that note, I just wanted to say thank you everyone for coming today. This is actually SIA's first executive breakfast that we've held this year. And I do want to say special thanks to FASE of Current Technology for sponsoring this event, and also to IBM. And I'm going to do a proactive, shameless plug if I may. Another way to see Current Technology and also IBM, they're sponsoring our upcoming All About the Cloud conference, which is this May in San Francisco. Again, that was proactive, correct?
Excellent,
Yes.
I strongly recommend it. I was there last year. Last year was one of the best events. If you're interested in cloud and SaaS, that's the conference to go to.
Exactly.
That was bordering on aggressive.
Proactive and aggressive.
Proactive, aggressive.
You want good people to be there.
That's right, exactly.
But again, thank you all so very much. Fas is definitely, and thank you very
thank
much,
you,
Fas. Yes,
for having me.
excellent presentation. I know that he is definitely still available. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. And on that note, thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.